Well, as you mentioned there in the introduction, there was some pretty pointed messaging on China and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But underlying that was really an attempt by Penny Wong to try and recast Australia's image, but also its foreign policy more broadly in Southeast Asia. Now, there is a bit of history there. Southeast Asia has looked on a little bit uneasily over recent years as Australia has plunged into a whole lot of new arrangements, in particular the new Quad arrangement, or the rejuvenated Quad arrangement with India, the United States and Japan, as well as the AUKUS agreement with the US and the UK, which will allow Australia, at least in theory, to get nuclear-powered submarines in the future. All of these initiatives have left ASEAN nations a bit anxious that they might be sidelined by Australia and by the larger powers as well. That presents perhaps to some a potential threat to so-called ASEAN centrality, the orthodoxy that sits at the core of much Southeast Asian foreign policy. So Senator Wong was really trying to recast Australian foreign policy. She talked a lot today about a strategic equilibrium, about a region where the rules were respected. That's slightly less hard-edged than some of the rhetoric used by the Morrison government that talked a lot more about balances of power that favour freedom and emphasised Australia's agency a little bit more. The main message from Senator Wong seemed to be that the new Labor government will pay more attention to Southeast Asia, will prioritise its needs and wants a little bit more, and will perhaps consult more closely with Southeast Asia. Not that it's going to abandon any of those initiatives that I just listed. Let's take a listen to Penny Wong speaking to the IISS in Singapore a short time ago.
And we believe that Australia must find its security in Asia, not from Asia. And that means, above all, in Southeast Asia. We know we will always be better off in a world where rules, whether they govern trade or the maritime domain, or the environment or military engagement, are clear, mutually negotiated, and consistently followed.
And Stephen, what did Penny Wong have to say about China and its response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Well, Penny Wong used this speech, or parts of this speech, to try and ramp up pressure on China over the invasion of Ukraine. Now, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has had enormously destabilising impacts across the world. The economic aftershocks are huge, and Southeast Asia is not immune from many of those supply chain shocks. So it has had a profound impact, not just on the world, but on Southeast Asia as well. And Penny Wong wanted to really draw a line between Russia's behaviour and China's tacit support for the invasion, or at the very least its refusal to actually outwardly condemn the behaviour of Moscow here. Now, Penny Wong said that China should use its influence on Russia to bring the war to an end, and said that the world was watching Beijing's actions on this front very closely. So clearly she's trying to draw a direct line there between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's increasing aggression, as well as its no-limits partnership with Moscow. Now, whether Southeast Asian nations are willing to see Russia's invasion in that light, or whether they're willing to put any blame or responsibility home to Beijing, is a separate question. But clearly Penny Wong is trying to frame this question in the context of her broader pitch to Southeast Asian nations about the sort of region that Australia would like to see, and the role that Australia believes China should play in trying to achieve that strategic equilibrium.
And what are the chances of Penny Wong achieving a diplomatic breakthrough with Beijing?
Look, it's an interesting question. We know that Penny Wong is potentially going to meet Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, at the sidelines of the G20 meeting in Bali. Now, that's not confirmed, and she certainly didn't confirm that today, saying that arrangements were still, quote, fluid. But it does seem that there are talks away between officials at both levels to potentially line up a meeting, and that would be significant because it's been more than 2.5 years now since foreign ministers from Australia and China last spoke, or let alone met in person, and a meeting between Wang Yi and Penny Wong would signal a real warming, at least at a very very superficial level of ties between the two countries. It would show at least that there's serious dialogue now between the principals in the wake of Richard Marles' meeting with the Chinese Defence Minister in Singapore a few weeks ago. Of course, that doesn't mean that any of the core issues that lie at the heart of the differences between Australia and China are going to be resolved. China is yet to make any move to unwind any trade sanctions that it's placed on Australia. It's still holding to Australian citizens. in detention in China, and there's still a range of hard interests where Australia and China are really at stark opposition. So there's no immediate prospect of a profound thaw, but the fact that this discussion is now being talked about and the prospect of a talk between, or of a meeting between Penny Wong and Wang Yi is being openly canvassed does seem to show that there's an appetite in both Beijing and in Canberra to begin the process of talking in a more serious and sustained manner.
Meanwhile, the Solomon Islands Prime Minister has flagged that he wants a permanent Chinese police training program in his country. Is this likely to worry Australia?
Yes, it is. I don't think it will surprise Australian officials, but it will cause some anxiety. Manasseh Sogavare has made it very clear that he wants to turn to China as a security partner in a very big way. We saw, of course, earlier this year, back in April, that very contentious security pact signed between China and Solomon Islands. Now, Australia fears that could lead down the track to some sort of Chinese military presence in the country. But even leaving that question to one side, and it's worth noting Manasseh Sogavare has denied that prospect outright, but even pushing that to one side, there's still anxiety in Canberra about the growing police cooperation between Solomon Islands and China. Australia, of course, has always had a bit of a monopoly on police cooperation and training in Solomon Islands. It's invested an enormous amount of time, money and effort repeatedly stabilising the country. It's still at the core of police training efforts in Solomon Islands today. But increasingly, Manasseh Sogavare is looking to China. We've seen over the last 5 months a small Chinese police training team in Honiara training police there. We've seen a large number of replica weapons taken from China into Solomon Islands, stoking fears that China may try and bring more heavy equipment and armaments into the country for the police. And now we see Manasseh Sogavare today saying that he would like to see a, quote, permanent training arrangement between Solomon Islands and China. Now, exactly what this permanent arrangement would look like, we don't know. We don't know whether it would involve Chinese police permanently on the ground, but it is another signal that Mr. Sogavare is determined to cement security ties with Beijing, and that's all bad news in the eyes of officials in Canberra who worry not just about the long-term trajectory of Solomon Islands, but also doubt Manasseh Sogavare's word when he says that he has no plan to allow Chinese troops into the country.